name is Ariel. I am the owner of Fitness by Ariel. I am a decade plus certified personal trainer, group fitness instructor, retired pro athlete, fitness nutrition specialist, amongst many other things in the fitness industry. And this video is the third of 3 videos on my nutrition philosophy and nutrition plans and macro counting specifically. So if you have not watched the other 2 videos, then you need to stop this video right now and go back and watch the other 2 first, because this video is meant to follow those 2. So we've already determined who macros is good for and who it's not good for. We've determined other behavioral and lifestyle changes that we can make to nutrition aside from counting macros. And this video is meant to tell you how I determine, as your coach, what macros you should be eating if it's the case that this plan is going to be the one that you choose for your nutrition endeavors moving forward. So we've determined what your daily expenditure is. In the previous video, we talked about how to determine your daily caloric expenditure, your daily needs, how many calories you burn in a given day being in your body. So determining that number, we need to choose how many calories you are eating. And for many people, for the majority of my clients, they either want to build muscle or burn fat, or both. I would say 95% of my clients are trying to do both of those things at once. But it is different. Some folks are just trying to gain muscle, so it does depend. I determine that number dependent on what the person's goals are. So in general, if we want to gain muscle, if that's our primary goal, is to gain muscle, we need to be eating at least our daily expenditure. Or we need to be eating more. We need to be eating a little more than our daily expenditure, because if we're not eating in a surplus of our daily expenditure, our body doesn't have extra energy to spend on building new muscle, right? So in order to build more than what we already have, we need to give our body more fuel, right? And in order to burn fat, we need to be eating likely right around our daily expenditure, potentially a little bit under. However, if we are eating too far under, we can get what's called an adapted metabolism, meaning so the body wants to find homeostasis. The body always wants to find homeostasis. Okay, so the body doesn't care about your fitness goals, it doesn't care about your diet plans. Your body just wants to survive. And if it's not getting enough calories in, meaning we're eating at too big of a calorie deficit for too long, the body doesn't want to drop fat, because the body needs fat to survive. And the only way, or the main way, that our body is able to drop fat is when it's getting the proper amount of calories and nutrients that it needs. And it says, I know I'm getting the amount of food that I need, and I know I'm getting it on a regular basis. So I want to make my body as efficient as possible to work for me, which means I'm able to drop fat. And there's so many factors to that, not just nutrition, but that's the oversimplified version from the nutrition standpoint. And this is very backwards to what many folks have been taught, and what we've been taught about nutrition is eat less, work out more. And really, my philosophy with nutrition and with fitness, and what I want to know as your coach, is what's the most amount that we can eat and the least amount that we need to like work out in order to see the results you want to see. So working out or moving the body at a level that feels good for the person's mental health, physical health, sport specific training, whatever that is, and eating as much food as they want and as they can in order to see those results that they want to see, whether that's building muscle, performing in a sport, or just performing in their daily life, feeling good playing with their grandkids, feeling good going on a hike with friends, feeling good in their clothes, in their body, feeling confident, and what that means. So what's the most amount we can eat, and what's the least amount that we need to move our bodies in order to see those results? Now, so once we've determined what the person's daily expenditure is, and then we've determined what their goals are, I set that calorie amount. What's the amount of calories that person should be eating? So for a lot of people, that number ends up being somewhere around their daily expenditure, because like I said, for the majority of my clients, they want to increase muscle and burn fat. And there is a gray area where both of those things can happen. And usually that gray area is right around the person's daily expenditure. So they're getting enough calories to function and to work out hard, enough calories to fuel their workouts, and it's not too much in a surplus or too much in a deficit that they can't put on muscle and or burn fat. But this is part of working with me specifically as your coach, is every plan is individualized. Every individual is different, even if all of their body stats are the same age, the same height, the same weight, the same, even body fat percentage could be the same. But if their activity level is different, or one of those things is a little different, it will change all of those numbers. So if a person's main goal is to drop fat and they have that fat to lose, the most I would put their calorie deficit would be like 200 to 300 calories under their daily expenditure. Again, this totally depends. I don't want you to take this information and be like, okay, that's what I want to do, that's what I'm going to do, because it also totally depends on how you're eating now. If you're already eating 500 to 1,000 calories under your daily expenditure, you're already in a huge calorie deficit. Your metabolism is likely already in an adapted state, meaning it's adapted to that lower calorie amount. And what actually needs to happen is a period of refeeding and refueling. And this is potentially a whole other video on learning how to refeed and refuel our bodies so that we can get to the point where we're then able to burn fat again. Again, this is backwards to many people who are like, I don't understand. I'm working out a ton, I'm eating in a calorie deficit, and I'm not burning fat. Why isn't that happening? It's because we're not getting enough calories in, actually, and it takes some kind of unlearning to get to that point. So for those who are, let's say a person, I've determined their caloric intake needs to be, let's say, 2,200 calories. Okay. How I determine how many grams of protein a person should eat is I take their lean mass, which is their weight of their muscle. So lean mass is not the weight of your whole body, but just the weight of your muscle. And I take that number and I multiply it by 1.1 or 1.2. If I'm unable to take a person's lean mass or determine that, or take their body fat percentage, then a good range is 0.7 to 1 times their weight. and this is it. The reason that's kind of such a big range is it depends on if a person's body weight is lower or higher, right? If a person weighs 250 pounds, eating 250 grams of protein is too much. So that's where when we can determine their lean mass, we can get a more specific number for that. And for that person who's maybe 250 pounds, we might multiply their body weight by 0.7 or 0.8 to determine what their grams of protein should be. So for example, let's say we have a 150 pound person. We've determined that their protein needs are 150 grams of protein. Then we set that protein number. So that's the first thing I do when determining your macros, is setting your protein. For fat, I put the fat around 25% of total caloric intake. And this, again, depends on the person. Are they a person who actually ends up eating a lot of fat in their life because they naturally have a lifestyle where they do better with a higher fat diet? Maybe that number's closer to 30%. If they're a person who just like thrives on carbs and it's like carbs all day, and actually 25% is a lot for them, maybe we start them a little lower. So I also take them into consideration, how you're eating now. And then after I've determined your protein and your fat, then I fill in the rest with carbs. And so that's how I come up with your macro number. So one thing we have to remember about choosing or changing the way that we're eating, or the way that we're monitoring what food goes in, is that our body doesn't like yo-yo dieting. Our body doesn't like when it doesn't know what it's going to get. It doesn't know if it's getting a lot, too much, or if it's getting not enough. And so it kind of like freezes. It's like, well, I'm just gonna store what I can, because I never know if I'm gonna get too much or not enough. And so I'm gonna hang on to everything because it's in a stressed out state. Sometimes we know when we're stressed, and other times our tissues and our body and our cells can be stressed without that like forefront of stress in the forefront of our mind. So it's important to give our body consistency with consistent nutrition, consistent amounts of food, so that it knows, hey, I can work hard in my workouts. I can adapt to this level of stress in a workout, right? Working out is stress on our body, which is good. We want our bodies to adapt to a certain level of stress from working out, but then we also want it to rest. We also want it to know, yeah, I can work hard in a workout and I can rest and recover, and I can be in a fat burning state because I know I'm getting enough food coming in. And so we're trying to avoid this yo-yo dieting when it comes to macros, and eat in a more consistent way. The thing that's nice about macro counting, and you've probably heard this if you've heard about macros before, is that in general, we can eat whatever we want in order to have that baseline of calories and baseline of macros. We could technically eat whatever we want and still hit those numbers exactly. Now, if all of what we're eating is ultra processed and processed foods, even if we're hitting those numbers, are we going to feel good? Are our workouts going to be as effective? And are we able to move in ways that induce that fat burning state because we're not getting enough nutrients? No, not as much. So we also want to know what's going into our bodies. So the ingredient list in foods. Am I eating foods that are actually foods, that are whole foods, that come from the earth? And other beings, if we're meat eaters? Are we prioritizing those types of foods first? But then in general, we're able to eat those fun foods as well. And we're able to, through tracking and through monitoring, tracking our macros, we're able to incorporate those fun foods like, um, you know, cake at someone's birthday, or you always go out for pizza on a certain night of the week, or you know, you visit a family member and they cook for you. You know, you're able to accommodate those changes because you're tracking, and you start to learn, like, okay, if I eat a piece of cake for dinner, um, or I, you know, I'm not able to eat my usual breakfast food, and I ended up having a ton of meat this morning, and so my fat is really high. How do we make changes throughout the rest of the day in order to accommodate those little changes in what you ate? So, for example, we had a lot of sugar, we had a lot of carbs with the cake. Maybe we skip the fruit that we normally eat in order to match that carb number. So we're still able to hit our calorie number, hit our macro number with whatever food we decide to eat in a day. So when you receive a nutrition plan from me, a macro plan from me, I always include an example day. And in that example day, I include foods that you love and can't live without. So if you're like, hey, I like to eat this, for example, I have one client who on Fridays, she goes out with her daughter and they always go to Crumble Cookie. I don't know if any of you live by a Crumble Cookie, but they're like giant, giant sugary cookies. They're delicious and irresistible, right? And so she does that once a week. So I wrote in one of her example days what that would look like to eat that food in that day. And so this is another reason macro counting can be beneficial, because for some people who maybe think like, oh, if I eat these foods, then I've gone off the deep end and it's all over and I'll just throw in the towel. Like, I already ate this cookie or this donut, and so it's all over for me now. Instead of looking at, okay, I'm going to choose to eat this, I'm going to notice how it feels in my body, I'm going to track it and see how that fits in with my overall macros throughout the day. So that's how I come up with a macro plan. Now, after that, we can get more and more and more specific to really dial in every little piece of a person's nutrition plan. For many people, this is kind of way more than what they want to do, what they need to do in order to see the results they want to see. For some people who have very specific goals, like I said, like photo shoots, or maybe making weight for a sport, or they have a very specific measurable goal and we need to get more specific, we can go down the rabbit hole of more specifics. And some of these things include when to eat certain types of foods. So when to make sure that you're eating enough carbs around workout times, not eating too much sugar right before bed, things like that. For the majority of people just looking to optimize their nutrition, optimize their lifestyle, oftentimes just tracking macros and that basic formatting is enough for them to get started. But there's, like I said, so many directions depending on the individual. It's hard to even make a video that's like blanketed nutrition advice, because every person is absolutely different. And I love working with my clients one-on-one to determine what the best path is moving forward for them. And just to circle back to my first video, the two things that I make sure my clients do always before we move into any sort of macro plan or specific plan is, are you eating nourishing foods that support your body and your lifestyle and your activity level? Are we able to substitute more nutrient dense foods for or substitute processed and highly processed foods for more nutrient dense foods? And are we eating enough? Are you fueling your body for your workouts, for your movement practice? Are you eating enough food, especially around workout times when your body utilizes that fuel? So making sure that those two things are met before we do anything specific with macros. If you're interested in working with me, feel free to shoot me a message, shoot me an email. I'd love to talk with you more and hear about what your goals are.